This workshop will just cover the preliminary how to use Nvivo and how to use the virtual desktop for both Windows and Mac. It should work the same. My name is Tom Trevino. I have a Master of Arts in Communications, and this workshop is part of a series for the Advancing Research and Curriculum project, where we mostly help assist graduate students and faculty and staff for workshops like this. So, if you were assigned to use Nvivo, or if you've never used Nvivo before, you're probably wondering what is Nvivo. So, Nvivo is an internationally renowned commercial program available in multiple languages for Mac and Windows, and the software can be applied with text and media data for mixed method studies and provides an array of visual analytical representations. So essentially, it's a software tool used primarily for qualitative studies, but can also be adapted to use for quantitative studies, as you will see later on in this presentation. And it's actually a go-to tool for ARC and for a lot of research studies that involve interviews, and can also be used for survey data and a lot of other types of research. This particular program is very versatile in that way, and I think that you'll find it useful for your research. So this particular presentation will cover how to access the virtual desktop, which is the way that we provide the software over to people within the TAMU network, how to start and set up Nvivo, how to import your transcripts once you have transcribed them, how to set up a coding table, how to code a transcript in vivo, which means that you're coding while you're analyzing the data, um, analyzing data, and of course, exporting your data. In this case, it would be exporting code or any other data that you find useful during the analysis process. So first, let's go over the virtual desktop. To access our virtual desktop, you would go to uvirtualdesktop.tamu.edu. Not only does this have Nvivo, but you might also have access to SPSS and other programs offered by the ARC grant. So when you visit uVirtualDesktop, you will get this screen here with the ability to download an external program so you can access a remote desktop or access it directly online. When you access it directly online, it will work inside of a browser. So it's like having an entire computer within a web browser. So it's very important to understand that distinction. Because of this, you got to make sure that you do back up your file on a cloud storage. That way you're able to access it on any other computer as well. Now, the virtual desktop can be accessed on any computer, whether at home or on TAMU campus. It does not matter. So if you are on TAMU and you want to use Nvivo on one of the campus computers, you would still need to log on to the virtual desktop to access it. There are some benefits to using this because you can save your data on the virtual desktop and it will be saved throughout the semester. But if you want to take your research past that, we do recommend you back up your files on some sort of cloud storage or on your email. So the way I like to use it is to use the HTML access, which is where you are able to access it on a computer browser. Once you click this button here or this section where you access the HTML, you'll get this screen here and you can use your TAMU credentials. If you are a student, you would simply put your net ID and your password and claim student. Now, if you're a faculty member or staff, this would instead be TAMU. So for your net ID, it's basically what your email address is, but not the handle or not the domain there. Once you log in, you'll notice this screen that has different PCs associated to your account. Sometimes it'll say ARC Full Desktop. Maybe it'll say Nvivo for you. It does tend to change, but the one that's available to you based on your credentials is going to have that software available to you. So if you're joining this workshop, more than likely you have that have access to it. Now we're going to do a live demonstration on how to access any of these softwares. So I'm going to minimize this. Going to go to Nvivo page or the virtual desktop. So here, you virtual desktop at tamiu.edu. Simply go here. And while I'm doing this, feel free to sign on to it as well if you'd like to follow along. It's signing on to the U virtual desktop. Have Nvivo accessible to us. So, starting up Nvivo, you will find it on the desktop, but if not, you can always search it on the bottom of the screen here. Once you have accessed it and we're ready to get started, you may need to register your account if you have not done so. You can simply just log in using your TAMU credentials again, and it will automatically aggregate your license to your name since it is downloaded to that virtual desktop. So your license will be available to you. And when you create an account, you can actually log in and save some of your work directly on the program itself, and it'll be associated with your name. And then any updates to your license will be associated with your account. So once you're all set up and you've selected the prompts that it has for you to create your account, you can now start your new project. Assuming you've already collected all of your data, you would um, have your data separate on a different file, maybe PDF or a Word file, which is, let's say, for example, an interview. If you have an interview transcribed, um, then you would come onto Nvivo to then import. So before you import anything, you do start a new project by clicking New Project. From there, it'll prompt you to select a title, and then you select if you want to autosave or not. I highly recommend that you do select an autosave feature. That way, you're able to have the most up-to-date, files. And in case there's any network issues, you don't want your files to not be recovered. However, the beauty of the virtual desktop is that it will be saved on there. However, I can't stress enough that you should be backing up your files on some sort of cloud service. Tamu does offer Office 365 that includes OneDrive, which is a online cloud service for up to 1 terabyte of data for all of your different projects. But particularly for this one, it might be the best option for you since you do have that account paid for by Tamu. So once you adjust all of these settings, you can now import your transcribed interviews. So you would just have this screen available to you. You hit the import button, and then you'll be prompted to import all types of different files. So Nvivo lets you do a bunch of different imports. So you can import, let's say, a bibliography if you have one, so you can use your citations. You can use survey data, let's say that you had open-ended questions or multiple choice response questions. You can analyze them using Nvivo. You could just do normal files, which is what I'm going to demonstrate today, or you can do end capture, which is you're able to record the data and automatically have it on Nvivo for you. There's also an option to create your data. So let's say you're taking field notes that you want to analyze. You can take field notes here by creating a file for it. So you would just select create instead of import. But for now, we're doing an import. So let's do a live demonstration for that. As you see here, we have this screen, new project. I'll call this one Vivo Demo. Description, you could put just live demo for Nvivo. And make sure that it is saved onto an easily accessible folder. In this case, it's just going to be under My Documents. Click Next. And like I said, I do recommend you select autosave. Unless you would want like a reminder, you could adjust your reminders to every 5 minutes. However, if you're asking the program to remind you to autosave every 5 minutes, you might as well just autosave anyway. So that's what I like to do. So your recovery files could be every 30 minutes. You could do every hour, but for now, I'll just leave it there. And then we create our project. It's easy as that. If you would like to take a tour of this software on your own, you can. It's very handy. And in case you ever need any other questions, Nvivo does have these prompts here that will take you to their external website. So I'll just click right here. That'll tell you, what type of data sets it's able to do for you, all different kinds of things. You can see you can also do different media, not just text based. So that is pretty convenient. So I'm just going to minimize this, go back here. We're going to import. In this case, I have some demonstration files already. So as you notice, I have some Word documents here of two different interviews that were conducted. Now these aren't real interviews; they're just for demonstration purposes. So you are able to select more than one. So I'm going to select both of these. I also have a code book here, but we won't worry about that today. So these two interviews, you go ahead and open them, import, and here they are. Now, if you notice here on the left side, this is where your data is. So these are your two Microsoft Word documents, right? Or rather, your transcripts. So if you click one of them, it'll open them up here on the side. We have a brief description. The following interview with Brenda, which is the pseudonym, was conducted April 2013, yada yada. And then after these asterisks, we get the actual transcript. To open up the other one, which is Sam, following interview with Sam as a pseudonym, and you have your raw text from your transcript. You have both of them available to you right here if we just go to the files. Now, these will stay open even if you go to your codes, they'll remain open. To close them, you would simply just close them here. You're also able to switch back and forth, using these tabs on top. So just be sure that you're coding the correct interview when you're coding, and you can do as many interviews as you want for these. I'm just demonstrating two for the purpose of this workshop. All right, now we're getting into the good part, the coding. So there's a lot of different ways to code. There's no one right way. For this specific demonstration, I'm just going to show a very basic way on creating codes using a coding table and doing Nvivo coding, which means creating codes while reading your data. So now that our data is imported, you can create a code list by selecting on the coding section on the left part of the screen. So make sure you select this, not completely necessary, but once you create your codes, they'll only be viewable by selecting this area, which is to code. And then to create a code without looking at your data, you would select the Create tab and then create a code there. You can also create different things like a memo, or you can create a document like if you're transcribing and you want to transcribe directly on Nvivo, you can do that as well without having to import. So that's what the create a document is. And then create a case, which would just be like a particular interview that you want to select for a case or a project entirely. And you want to compare different projects to each other. That's what these are here. And you have notes and sets and so on. So you can create codes before looking at your transcript, and this is the best way to do it. You create a code. So here, once you create a few codes, you go back to data, And then you can assign either a code here. I'm not sure if you can see that. It might be a little small. I'm going to zoom in. So let's say this piece of text right here you wanted to code. You can either go to a code selection, which are the previous codes that you created on the previous screen, or you can code in vivo, which is what I was describing earlier. So this is when you create a code on the fly, or rather, it automatically creates a code that is this text that you selected. And then you go back to your codes and you can rename it. But this is something significant and you want to mark it as you're reading your data. This is the best way to do it, is to code in Nvivo, which is where the name comes from, because you're doing it on the fly, or you're doing it like a live. If you do select a code, or if you do create your codes beforehand, then you would just go to code selection. These are some codes here: challenging, confident, health, qualities. These are some codes had just created there for demonstration purposes, and you would select one of them to go under that bit of text. So I know this sounds a little complicated. I'm saying code every other sentence. So I'm going to do a live demonstration of this as well. So you're here in Nvivo. You already did your transcriptions. You already imported your transcriptions. And let's say you have a code like a list, right? You have a code list based on your theories. You've read some sources, and these are certain codes you got to look for. So you want to create these codes. That way you can assign certain sections of your text as having those codes. Something else that I should mention also is that if you're not sure about what type of code you should be using, Nvivo does have resources on their external website to assist you. So if you click more, it brings you to your website. And if you don't know too much about coding, you can learn a little bit more based on their feedback here, or their resources here. So that's handy in case you don't know too much about coding or you need a little bit more guidance. But it's all going to depend on what your research, from your secondary sources tell you what you should be looking for if you're going to go this route. So close this. We're going to create a code. So I have a code book right here on certain things to look at. This is from a different resource. I hope you guys can see that. So this is just a list of different codes here. They do have explanations, but I'm just going to create a few of them here. So this particular one is about digestive disorders. So it's very health oriented. So this could be considered a health sort of study if you wanted to. So let me see what we can. So then one of them could be maybe health concerns, health concern, or health description even. So we could just call it health concern, and then it creates a code. Now, since you selected code over here, your codes will appear right here. Let's create another one. Let's say that we have like a list, right? So we say health description. So like, let's say they're describing their health condition, health description. Let's do maybe family, talk about family. Do another one, maybe financial. And this is just kind of on the fly. Let's, again, you wouldn't use a predetermined code book unless you know what you're looking for beforehand based on previous research that'll tell you exactly what themes, or maybe a certain theory that you're trying to look at. So let's do one more. We'll do, another way to do it, instead of pressing code, you could just right click, which is the way I do it, kind of a reflex now. Could just right click, new code. You can also do Control Shift N if you wanted to. But there's a lot of different ways to do things using it. But to keep it simple, there's a button for it as well. So let's do overcoming. Okay, so these are just five. Typically, you want quite a bit more of these, but this is how you create your codes to then use. So if you notice, for like let's say family, we have zero files, but we have two files open and zero references to those files. So what does this mean, right? So let me demonstrate here on how this would necessarily go. So the transcript reads, bowel disorders. It is what it is. This is from Brenda specifically, and I have a code for that. I would call it maybe a health concern, for example. There might be a better code out there, but for the purposes of this, I'm going to code it as a health concern, and then bam, we have one reference from one file, which is this one. If we go to the other file and we do, let's see, right here, I think medical doctors is because of lawsuits, perhaps the liability. She's hesitant here. I would call it a concern, right? So you would simply highlight this area, code selection, health concern. So now we have two references from two different files. All right, what does this mean? And we're tallying up all of these different codes, but what does it exactly mean? So if we click on the code, double click on the code here, it'll have these links to the specific part of the document. So this is 0.19% coverage. If we keep going throughout the entire interview, having more and more instances, that percentage will increase. And so what I coded as a health concern, it marked, bowel disorders. It is what it is. And it also did it for this line. And these are two separate documents. Now, if you have more documents, this number could be higher. So it could be higher references, but a lower amount of files, right? So you can kind of tell which tab is a file by these little icons here, and which one is a code by this circle there. Let's just keep coding this so we know what it's like. So I'm gonna do code Nvivo. Bam. And then it just creates a code and calls it that. So I can keep going and keep doing Nvivo codes. And as I'm going to the code, I can double click and change the name of it at any time. So this one, we'll call it different conditions, right? So you can create codes as you go, and that's a more constructivist approach. And it's something I personally favor, and I think that a lot of researchers tend to favor it when they're reading through their data, and if they don't have necessarily a code book like I do myself, with predetermined codes from before. So, anyways, I think that's enough there. So essentially, you want to do your entire transcripts, and then you go to your other transcript, you do the entire coding process all over again. Once you're all set with your coding, here it only shows that I coded two things, but let's say it was a lot more coding, and you want to take a look at your data, kind of see what exactly it is you're working with. You would use Explore to kind of analyze, or at least do a preliminary sort of analysis of the work that you of the data that you collected, and you can create charts, a hierarchy chart. You could do a word map, a diagram, and this is exactly why people use Nvivo, because of this particular window right here, the Explore tab, because they can demonstrate and show their data, for anyone who might be interested. And it shows that, there is real meaning that it is being extracted from these interviews. So when you go to Explore, you can run what's called word frequency query. This is just one of the many different things that you can do. And it kind of shows how often a word is done. So you would run the query, right? And you would go through the different settings, and then you'll view on the right hand side, once you run the query, the different ways that you can show your data. And let's say that you wanted to export your code like a list. Let's say you created a bunch of codes that you need to take a closer look at, maybe recategorize all of your codes into smaller categories. You can export all of your codes by going to the share tab, export, and then click export again. When you click export codebook, this will export it in a Nvivo only format, so you can only use it in Nvivo. So just keep that in mind. But if you click the normal export, that'll export it in a Word document or an Excel file, one of those. So let's do a live demonstration of that. So we have a few codes here. We want to explore a little bit more. Let's do a word frequency. Those are always fun. We're going to do the first 1,000 most frequent words. There's not that many words, so let's do the first 200 words. The minimum length, let's do 4. You know what? Let's do 3. I think 3 is fine. Okay. So this is just looking at the frequency of words that are in these 2 documents that you uploaded. So we run the query, and it looks like the most used word is the word like. It tells you the length of it, the count 182 times. So 3% of this whole document is the word like, right? And then it goes on more, and we get some more interesting stuff like gluten, which makes sense because this is digestive disorders, right? We get people going, so this might be something. This is the more analytical part, or rather the quantitative parts that you might want to look at. But this is just a list. And Vivo is pretty cool because you could generate, let's say, a word cloud, which is a fun one. Give it a second for it to load. It's loading 200 different words right now because that's how many display words we chose. Now, okay. So these are the top words, the ones that are highlighted, and as they get smaller, these words are not as used, but still prevalent. So like, let's say the word pizza is more prevalent in there than the word gonna, right? Or treating or emotional, right? But one of the more prominent words is gluten. So this is an interesting way to demonstrate your data. And if you've ever seen this in a textbook or a study, probably use a program like Nvivo to show it, which is a fun way to do it. You can also do a tree map. You can format this as much as you want. It kind of shows the different frequencies of the words and how it gets more condensed on this side as the disparity of the word increases. Do a cluster analysis. Let's do a little zoom in here. This kind of just puts where they fall in line next to each other. So these are similar to each other. So it all depends on what you're going to need your data to show. But overall, that is that. And there's a bunch of different ways you can share your data also. This is just a simple word frequency query. We could do a text search if we wanted to find a specific search, or you can run a query wizard. So if you're not even sure about what you're going to look for, you could run this wizard to find out specifically. Okay, so we've created these codes. We want to export these to take a closer look at them, maybe put stuff together. In this case, I guess I would put health description and health concern maybe together, into one theme entirely. Or let's say that I want to show somebody else my code book and compare it to their code book of the exact same interviews and transcripts. You want to compare them to make sure they have the same themes to ensure intercoder reliability. So you would share this, export, and you export a list, and then it automatically does it on Microsoft Excel. But you could do Microsoft Word or a PDF. let's do this one. Codes and today's date, 4/13/2022. Save. Okay. And if we open this up, I've got it on my documents. Codes, today's date, open it up, and then it has this nice little file here. So we can kind of play with these and move them around now that they're all neat for us. One last thing before I go, because I did mention this before, but I would like to reiterate that it's very important to back up your data. I know that in the beginning I did set it to autosave, but that's still only on the virtual desktop. So I do want to ensure that I'm backing up a saved file on the cloud service that is provided by TAMU. And if you are in the TAMU network, you will have access to OneDrive, which should just be your credentials. This goes for staff, faculty, students, anybody should have access to it. So right here, let's say I'm going to create a new folder, Nvivo files, create, open this up, and this will be on the internet for me even outside of the virtual desktop. Okay, so then I just bring up my backed up file, which is Nvivo demo in this case. Copy that over, and it's the most recent one too. And just make sure it uploads, bam. And if you notice, it's .nvp, which is the Nvivo. So if you were to download this on a computer that doesn't have Nvivo, then it might not automatically download. But if you open it back up on the virtual desktop, it'll work just fine. And this is just a precaution because, this is a lot of intensive work, or rather a bunch of tedious work. So I would hate for anything to happen to where you lose data in the virtual desktop. Maybe there's an update or something that is erased. This is a good way to ensure that nothing gets lost. Other than that, that will conclude this introduction to Nvivo